Aloha, everyone. I'm Corey Rosenlee, President of the Hawaii State Teachers Association. This is a continuing communication that HSTA has been having around the coronavirus, also known as the COVID-19. Joining me today are our HSTA's Vice President, Osa Tui. We have our Secretary Treasurer, Logan Okita, and our Deputy Executive Director and Chief Negotiator, Andrea Eshelman. Normally during this time, what HSTA does is myself and the officers, we go out to our schools and listen to our teachers. And the idea is we have these listening sessions to be able to hear your stories. These stories are so important because these stories become the things that we can share with legislators and other leaders about what's going on in our schools. And I'll tell you that these are so important in deciding what we do together as a union to try to advocate for the things that will make a difference in our teachers' lives. Now, during this pandemic, we can't go out and go to individual schools and to hear these stories. But now more than ever, these stories are so important. What's going on in our schools is so diverse across the state, and it's so important for everyone to be able to hear what's going on. So today we want to be able to hear your stories. What you can do is in the Facebook comments below, you can put in what's going on at your school and share your story. HSTA has also created a bit.ly, bit.ly, and I'll read this off. It's a HSTA school reopening. If you want to be anonymous, you can put it in there. So I'm going to say that again. It's bit.ly / HSTA school reopening. And that allows you to be anonymous if you want to be. But it is so important, like I said, to be able to hear your stories. When we've done Facebook Lives, we know that leaders from across the state are paying attention to these things. We have legislators and principals and complex area superintendents and Board of Education members. And they can't always visit every classroom either. So today we want to be your voice. It is so important that we share your stories, otherwise no one has an idea of what our teachers are going through. So we're going to ask you to put the stuff into the comments or share it at the bit.ly to be able to get that information. I want to thank the people that are helping out today. We have our staff, our great communication staff at HSTA. They've been helping out. One of our HSTA members, Kelly Ka'ana'ana, is helping out as well. And we're going to be monitoring these questions. And then what we're going to do is, Logan and Osa have agreed to be able to be your voice. They'll be sharing it. And then we'll try as best we can to either try to respond to it sometimes if we can. Andy and myself will try to respond to it. Sometimes it's just sharing your story. And with that, I will turn it over to Osa.
Yeah, so we're over a month into the working year and HSTA continues to work on your behalf. In this presentation, we'll be covering things like distance learning, telework, clean and sanitary workspaces, PPE, in-person teaching for students with special needs and vulnerable students, and other items that have come up recently. We want to warn you in advance that we will not engage in answering personal questions or those related to individual teachers or students. But we also ask that you not disclose personal information in the Facebook comments, as that is not a confidential location.
If you have individual concerns and questions, please go to our website and click Contact. You can also go to bit.ly / contact HSTA. Your message will be routed to the appropriate UNISERV director for follow-up. You can put your stories in the Facebook comment section, or if you want to share with us privately, you can go to bit.ly / HSTA school reopening and fill out the form. Our first issue topic. We received a number of questions from members in the last week, and we're going to start with a couple about telework. The first comes from a Neighbor Island Elementary school teacher who writes, "Why can't we telecommute from home? The messages that we're receiving in our complex is that every request is getting denied." The second is from an Oahu middle school teacher who says, "Trying to teach virtually, make calls, have meetings with 3 teachers in a room. Why can't we telecommute? We would have privacy and quiet at home." Please share with us bit.ly / HSTA telework to report if you have been approved or denied. We're trying to collect this data to help us in future bargaining sessions telework is a management right, and we are having to collect the data and find out information from you as you're requesting it in your site, and we're encouraging you to request it if it is something that you find appropriate for your situation. Andy and Corey, do you have anything to add?
So let me try to answer that one. First of all, HSTA believes that all of our teachers should have the ability to telecommute. Recently, we heard Mayor Caldwell say, if you can work at home, you should be working at home. We've had a teacher share that she has to drive an hour and a half each way, and she doesn't understand that. So I want you to know that HSTA is still advocating for our teachers to have the ability to telework. And for those of you, like I said, I've been using that teacher story, the one that has to commute, and it's so important that you do share your stories. So again, if you want to, in the comment section, please share your story about telework. Also, just to share that we have been hearing that certain principals are allowing telework and certain principals are not, and some complex areas are allowing it and some are not. That is totally not fair. And that is something that we're advocating for as well. Okay.
Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
I just want to encourage people that there is an article on our website, and we have sent it out through our member matters to give you a little bit more guidance on telework. One thing that you need to remember is that the telework request should not be so you can stay home and take care of your kids. It should not be so that you can stay home and take care of a loved one. That would be more appropriate to take leave. It's really about if your situation works, that you don't need to be on campus and you can easily do your job from home, you have adequate internet, things like that, then you should definitely be putting in that request. If you have a medical disability type situation and you need an accommodation, that is a whole different process. And again, on our website, we have. Thanks.
And I'll just jump one more thing there, that again, I want to give it that bit.ly so that we can track which schools or complex areas are not getting it. So that's something that we can advocate for. It is bit.ly /HSTA telework, bit.ly /HSTA telework. And if you have been either way, if you've been accepted or you've not been accepted, it gives us good information to be able to track it. So thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Osa for the next.
And yeah, thank you also to the many of you who have already submitted on there. If you submitted once, you don't have to submit again unless the situation has changed. Another big topic that's come up, we've heard from our teachers. This one's specifically from a neighbor island teacher, but many are saying the same thing. They have concern about personal protective equipment or PPE. And this teacher says they were only given 1 spray bottle of spick and span, 2 cloth masks, and a face shield, and that was it. Do you have any comments on that?
So what the Department of Education has said is that they have enough PPE gear. We have seen legislators ask them this question numerous times, and they have suggested they have it. So in this situation, the first most important thing is to ask your principal to make sure that you get enough. And if you're not getting enough and you've approached your principal, our legislators want to hear it. You should reach out to your local legislator and share this information so that they have an opportunity to ask the DOE if not only are they getting enough funding, but they're getting the equipment out to the schools, because it is important to have, safety for you at our schools. Andy, anything you want to add on that?
I just want to encourage folks to make sure that you are aware of and review our MOU on COVID that was agreed to this summer. It is on our website. You can also access it at bit.ly /HSTA COVID MOU. On page 5, and I'm just looking over here at my reference on my other screen, on page 5 of our MOU, it starts the section dealing with PPE, and then there's also a separate section dealing with cleaning. So Osa, you had mentioned both masks as well as cleaning supplies, and so there is language there that talks about, especially if you are an employee who is in a more high-risk position. For example, if you are a preschool teacher, you're going to need to be provided additional PPE materials because it's more likely that you're going to have to get within 6 feet of students. You are also supposed to be provided cleaning supplies. However, I want to emphasize it is not your job to clean and disinfect classrooms, right? That is actually something that's been in our contract for a long time, that it is, that's a custodial duty. And so you should be aware of that language. So please check out our MOU on page 5 and 6, and there are more details there.
Okay.
That leads perfectly into the next question we've received from a Neighbor Island intermediate school teacher who asked, or who told us that we need accountability for cleaning. Sites are never cleaned to an acceptable standard, and asked, how can we ensure proper cleaning besides doing it ourselves?
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. You know, and I think right now our custodians have been given an impossible job as well, trying to keep our school safe and trying to wash down common areas has been very difficult. A story that a teacher shared with me is that, you know, in their restroom, they didn't have enough toilet paper. And if they can't get enough toilet paper in the room, how can they make sure it's clean? And that is why, you know, we have been still advocating that our schools should be 100% distance learning, because it's just too difficult of a job right now to make sure that we can clean all that. And even for the brief time that our schools are open, having, you know, kids come in and out between classes, I mean, it just became an impossible task. And that's why we just don't think right now that it's safe. And anything you want to add to that?
I would just encourage people to look at the MOU. It does have some language in there that talks about those surfaces should be cleaned at least once daily. So, you know, normal classroom cleaners are supposed to sweep, take out your trash, but this additional MOU, and this is contract language that was agreed to all the way up to the governor. And if it's not being complied with, you need to talk to your school level leaders. And if necessary, we can pursue either individual grievances or a class grievance on behalf of, say, your building or the teachers in your school. We do have a class grievance for the entire unit specific to multiple things that we're talking about right now, and that is moving forward. But oftentimes, if it's specific to your classroom or your school, we can also do something specific for you. So please talk to your APC and your grievance rep, and contact your UNISERV, and if necessary, we'll pursue that as well.
And I'm going to say this again. It's so important when we are advocating that your stories matter. This is why we're holding this listening session. If you want to and you feel comfortable, you can put your story into the comment section of the Facebook or the YouTube, and so that we can try to share your story. Also, we have the bit.ly if you want to be anonymous and you don't want your name on the Facebook, which is public for everyone to see. That is bit.ly /HSTA school reopening. Okay. I want to keep on reminding everyone to be able to do that because it's so important that we hear your stories. Okay. Next one.
Absolutely. We've received a couple of questions about the ACELUS remote learning program being used by the DOE. For instance, I'm very concerned about the questionable racial stereotyping in ACELUS, but also the rigor and content. The lessons are years behind current grade. Someone else said, will ACELUS be pulled? It's not teaching kids new content. It's giving lessons years behind where they are and promotes racial stereotyping. Corey?
Thank you. And it was because of what we were hearing from you. I appreciated the teachers that were sending in clips and pictures, and we saw how horrible some of the examples from ACELUS were as well. I know that the Board of Education is concerned about this and that they may be addressing in the future. I think it's very important that those comments are shared with the Board of Education. I know they have been shared with the department as well, and I've seen some schools have already moved away from ACELUS. I'm going to ask Logan, did you want to jump in here and talk about this as well?
I do. So I teach at one of the schools that decided that ACELUS was not only not rigorous enough for our students, but it was not the material we wanted to have them accessing and the content. And we decided that it was best for our school community to make the decision to stop our contract and be able to work with our students in other ways. And we quickly shifted. And as much as I hate the word pivot, we turned and we did a quick pivot after school started because it wasn't the right program for our students.
And again, I'm going to point out how important it was to get those examples from you. And this is why we're doing something like this. Okay.
I have a question. about SPED. So many of our colleagues who teach the vulnerable population are asking, what are we doing about the SPED workload?
So it would help me, for those that wrote that, to be able to share what the workload is and what is going on. Because the perception is that life is not different, and we know it is. I know I've heard from teachers across the state talking about how hard it is to be able to deal with the current situation of doing distance learning. So it would be helpful for us if in the comment section you would tell us what is different now. How much are you working? It is because those are the stories that we can then potentially share. So to ask, if you're a SPED teacher watching this, please share your story.
If I could just add a couple things, Corey. One thing is that we have just in the last couple of days gotten an increase of communication from members sharing that there seems to be an uptick in understanding of what they're supposed to get done by the end of the quarter. So I am in the process of reaching out to the DOE to try and get a handle on what that means and what people are actually being asked to do. We also have gotten a lot of questions about the section in our MOU, again, which you can access at bit.ly/HSTA COVID MOU. It's on our website. On page 7, there's a section for care coordinators of students with special needs. So way back in June, we knew that there was going to be need to be time to be provided to special education students care coordinators because of IDEA and the need to work on figuring out any compensatory services that needed to be made up for the lost time in the spring. And then actually, in addition, because we pushed back the start of the school year this year, that extra, what was it, nine days, I think it was, Osa, that there's a discussion that needed to occur. So everyone who has a responsibility of being a care coordinator is supposed to be at 3 hours in this quarter to be able to do that. A memo came out, I think it was last week, specific to that there is money to pay for subs because that's likely the easiest and fastest way that they're going to be able to get you the time. There is no plan by the department right now to, for example, tell you that they're just going to pay you more money. They'll give you the hours, the time during your workday. And so make sure if you are a care coordinator for a student that has an IEP, that you are talking to your administrator about getting that time. Now that may mean the entire last week of the quarter, you have a sub because they haven't been on the ball at getting those hours and that SPED funding for the substitutes out fast. So please make sure that you're working on that. That is supposed to be for you to figure out, facilitate those conversations, do the assessments, and then figure out what compensatory service is. We're also trying to get more clarity on what that is because I believe there's been a lack of guidance from the feds as well. So it's all part of the conversation we're having at the state level.
And I'm actually going to ask a question. I think I've heard it from people before, but related to what you said, what are our teachers supposed to do about substitutes right now? Like we have our Google Classrooms and all of that set up. How do we get a substitute to do that?
So that's one of the things that we've been asking about. What we've made clear to the employer is that we do not want to see, and I don't believe this should be happening because the DOE indicated that they were not looking to do that. We should not be having teachers being asked to give their ID and password to subs. So they should not be passing off, if Logan's my sub, I shouldn't be giving her my ID and password to my Google Classroom. The DOE has got to work out and facilitate ways to get information to those subs. I've been told that all the subs have a DOE issued email. If that means that they then need to get them a WebEx account or whatever they need to do, but they should not be getting access to your accounts in that manner. And so that's something that we've asked a lot of questions on. I'll be very frank, we have not gotten a lot of responses on that. You should not be subbing for other teachers, and they should be providing you a mechanism to get a substitute. So one thing that we are concerned is we've heard a few stories where teachers are being told, oh, just upload everything in Google Classroom and do it from home while you're on sick leave. No, you can be asked to provide a lesson plan, but that is very different than like managing your class from home. If you're being charged a sick day, you provide your lesson plan to your sub and that's it. You shouldn't be working from home on a sick day. Is that kind of what you were asking about, Lisa?
Yes, absolutely. We've heard other I've heard anecdotally from some schools on neighbor islands where they want to do the telework from home instead of calling in a sub because they may feel, I have a, my throat feels a little itchy, and just to be totally safe, I would like to just telework, and their administrator has told them, if you're too sick to come in, you're too sick to telework, so too bad. And that's really wrong. That's one of the stories I've heard.
Yeah, I would agree to a certain degree. One thing we should be aware of is under the CARES Act, they passed the FSCRA leave, right? So this is the special COVID leave that if you are ordered to quarantine by a doctor, that you could potentially have access to that leave. But one of the options of that leave is you could also telework. So if you can telework, you don't need to take that leave. So I think principals should be generous and thoughtful about how they are implementing those options. And if that teacher doesn't need to be physically on site to do in-person instruction, they should be given the option to telework.
And so connected to giving out Google or giving out passwords to substitutes, administrators are asking to sit in during virtual learning classes. Do I have to agree to this observation?
So Corey, you want to answer that, or you want me to do that?
You can take that one.
So this is more of a contract piece. So there's actually some language both in your main contract under evaluation, as well as language in the MOU. And give me a second here. I believe it is starts on page 10, regarding teachers' privacy will be protected while engaging remotely with students. So one thing that you need to understand, and it's kind of hard to wrap our head around in this new world, is that your supervisor, your principal, your administrator, actually any administrator, frankly, your principal, a VP, your CAS, the state superintendent, they have the right to come into your classroom and observe at any time. It can be an informal or it can be a formal. A formal observation, you have to have 24 hours notice, because that can be used for your teacher evaluation. But they can walk in at any time. Obviously, it shouldn't be excessive. It shouldn't be interrupting. But just like they could walk down the hallway from their office and pop in and observe you teaching, they have the right to ask for your WebEx or your Google Hangout to be invited. Is that the right term, Logan? Google Hangout? I can never remember if it's Google or Google Meet, Google Hangout. Meet. Anyway, Google Meet. That they have the right to ask for that so that they can pop into your classroom. That they can't record you, which you're controlling that WebEx, so you're not going to let them record anyway, without your permission. You should know that it has to be with your knowledge if it's an administrator coming in. And if your teacher, coach, or mentor wants to come in, do that observation, that can be done, but that one requires your consent, and that language is in our MOU, right? So everything has to be in the open. Your principal shouldn't be sneaking in at the last minute and not announcing, right? They should be letting you know, put it in the chat or announce themselves. Hi, Ms. Eshelman, just wanted to stop by and say hi to the students or what have you.
So I do want to take this time to remind everyone, thank you for those that have joined in. This is an HSTA listening session to be able to hear your concerns and to hear your stories about what's going on in the classrooms. As I'm watching, I thank you for all of you that are putting in the comments into the Facebook, into YouTube as well. We are trying to keep track of that so that we can be your voices. We appreciate the questions that are coming in too. If you do want to remain anonymous, we have set up a bit.ly at bit.ly/HSTA school reopening. Is that correct? School reopening? Yes. Okay. So I want to thank you. Keep on submitting in. We really do want to hear your stories and to do the best to try to answer some of your questions as well. Okay, so what's the next one we have?
So Corey, our school has done an outstanding job with safety. I think each school should be allowed to decide on whether to reopen in person or not, says one of our commenters.
So thank you. And one of the things I really appreciate, and I've heard from teachers across the state, how much we want to be back into the classroom. One of the things that we are monitoring across the nation is this one basic question: can schools reopen effectively, especially looking at a school system similar to Hawaii? And what we've seen is two things. Either schools have gone to distance learning for their students, or we have seen a couple places try to reopen: Georgia, Alabama, Florida. And in the places that have reopened, what has occurred is they were not able to do it effectively. Cases went up at the school, cases went up in the state or the district where they were, and they ended up going to 100% distance learning. So one of the things that teachers have asked from across the state is consistency. They want to know what's going to be happening going forward, and opening and closing. And just to say that, last week alone, we had over 20 cases. The last thing we want is that a student or a teacher dies from the coronavirus because of being exposed. And we have seen across the nation, just recently, we heard I think there were 6 deaths of teachers. And so the most important thing right now is the health and safety of our students and our teachers.
Thank you, Corey, which leads well into the next question. Is there any information about second quarter and if we're going to continue distance learning?
Yeah, so I think this decision has to be made quickly. We appreciate the DOE did decide to make the decision to go for the entire first quarter. There's no evidence right now that cases on our schools are going down. We've had some decrease in the state overall, but that jumped up today again. And I think that we need to show that over a period of time that there is cases that you have to look at the data and not necessarily look at the date, but I've heard from many teachers, they want consistency. So I think that for second quarter, this is something that, has to be something that we look at in trying to make sure that we have consistency for teachers and students.
All right, let's see. Very, very weighing on people's minds. Are furloughs and pay cuts coming to us soon?
Yes, I think this is a deep concern for all of us. And before the coronavirus crisis and the pandemic hit, one of the things that HSTA was working on was trying to end the teacher shortage. And part of that problem was dealing with the pay cuts that we took during the last crisis and how many of our teachers had not moved up on steps because of that. So we've been monitoring the same things you have with what the governor's been saying, but this is what we're also trying to look at. We're watching what's happening at the federal level. One of the things that the Democrats have proposed is more funding for the states and for schools. And the Republicans have proposed more funding for the schools, but that was with the caveat that had to be face-to-face learning, and that's something we support. Federal help in that area. We are also closely monitoring the election. I will say this, that altogether, as the National Education Association, we have endorsed Joe Biden to be the president, and we are hoping that people go out and vote. Having more federal funding is going to be crucial in trying to avoid pay cuts, and that's something that we're advocating for.
Corey, could I just add a couple of things I think that are really important from myself as the chief negotiator? So currently, you have a bargaining agreement that expires on June 30th. The governor's orders notwithstanding does not diminish that bargaining agreement. There is a pay raise that is slated to go into effect at the start of second quarter. And we have no indication from the employer that they plan to do anything around that, it was funded in 2019 legislative session. It was budgeted for, and that should be going forward. If the employer comes to us and they want to have some sort of conversation to what OSA was referring to, either pay cuts or furloughs, we will obviously, in good faith, have those discussions. But between now and June 30th, you have a contract and that's in place. We are going to go back to the table this November to begin our bargaining for what's called successor negotiations. We do not know what will happen come July 1st of 2021, but we will definitely keep you apprised.
And this is important why we stay together as a union. We're going to have to watch this legislative session. We're going to have to work with our national organization at the federal level. And this is so important that we are not alone, that we are together as one union during this time. And I'm going to jump in on that previous question too. even though you may be healthy and you may feel safe going to campus, we have to remember that you may have teachers on your campuses that are at risk, that have been denied accommodations, and they're terrified. So while some teachers may feel comfortable and understand they need to go back, we need to stick together, and we have to support each other, whether it's regular ed or special education, whether you're young or whether you're older or have underlying health conditions. We have to be there for each other.
So going back to the national issue, if I have a telework agreement, can I go out of state to work?
I'll let you handle that one, Andy.
So to my knowledge, the employer has not changed their position. They will not approve you to work, to telework out of state. So if you disclose that, they will likely tell you that you need to take leave.
What's the reasonable time frame to hear back on your telework application?
You want me to take that one, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Quite honestly, it should be fairly quickly. You shouldn't be sitting and waiting for a long period of time, but there's no specific timeline.
Okay, what do we have next?
So I'd like to share a story from one of our teachers that put their comments in Facebook. When we had our in-person week to prepare for distance learning, students came in small groups to discuss the return to school and make sure they could have access to technology. It was frightening and frustrating to give instructions on my part and to receive instructions on the students' part. Students were nervous, were not great about wearing their masks appropriately. A number of them had their noses exposed. I was teaching them through my mask, a face shield, and a transparent barrier. I couldn't understand my students, and they couldn't understand me. I ended up not standing behind my barrier, and that concerns me as I am at high risk of complications from COVID-19. It was immensely difficult and frustrating, as difficult as it is to teach online, especially in my hands-on art class. And I believe this teacher is teaches high school.
So first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. This is again why we are doing this, and I appreciate you taking the time to share this. I was just having a conversation yesterday with a legislator, and they were asking questions about school reopening. And one of the things that we've talked about is not just what happens inside the classroom, but what happens in between classes when kids are at lunch or after school, and whether they're wearing their mask or congregating into groups, and how safe is that environment. And so I know that, again, when we talk about school reopening, it's so important to see what's actually happening in the classrooms and how difficult that is, and that's something that we need to advocate for. I don't know if Logan or Osa, you wanted to join in and say anything else about that as well. Okay.
I have a couple of questions that are related. So one person asked on Facebook, for sick days, if the school is asking us to make the lessons asynchronous, is that okay, or just provide sub-plans? A similar question was, when creating sub-plans for distance learning, can I create a day for all asynchronous learning? Can the admin direct teachers to include synchronous learning? I think that's happening a lot.
So
Want to get that one, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, your contract says you can be asked to provide a sub-plan in the first 5 days of absence. Beyond that, you are not required to provide a sub-plan. That is, that's language that's been in the contract for years. That has not changed. So I would not say that asynchronous learning is necessarily a sub-plan, right? So a sub-plan is a plan to direct another human to do whatever they need to do to tell your kids what they need to do. And so you should write up your sub-plan as if it is for someone else to implement. And that's what should be happening. Did I answer? I think I answered all of it. I'm not sure. That's a long question.
Okay.
Okay, another question regarding telework. Is there a deadline for requesting telework? Can they request only until the end of first quarter or until the end of second quarter for the entire year?
Corey, you want to do it or you want me to handle that?
So there's no deadline.
Yeah, there's no deadline. One thing I'll note that you folks should be aware of, right, is so we were on a status of working remotely in the spring. That was the agreement we came to with the employer. Then summer started, 12-monthers were given the opportunity to apply for telework. We continue to advocate that teachers who didn't need to do in-person, who had the option, should be given telework into the new school year. The DOE launched that. The decisions on telework are being made based on the conditions at that point in time. So if something changes with what you're being expected to do, your principal can pull back that telework agreement, right? Or if something changes to the positive of like, it looks like telework could happen more likely, then that can also happen. For right now, we know of no plan that the DOE is going to stop that program, but you do need to know that's an employer right, and they could just announce we are no longer offering telework.
All right, I have a question. Well, before the question, we've been very successful with the Board of Ed listening to the stories of our teachers and, you know, taking that into account in the decisions they've made. So the question is, when is the next Board of Education meeting? And do you have any suggestions?
So yes, and I've heard from Board of Education members that actually go through all that testimony. They appreciate hearing your stories as well to get a feeling of what's going on. And again, this is why we're doing this today, to be able to hear your stories. And so that's something that we can share as well. So the next board meeting is September 17th on Thursday. They have not put up the agenda. They usually put up the agenda Friday afternoons. And this is the opportunity for you to have the voice, but you can also email the Board of Education members. It's important that they hear these stories as well. You know, and when I have a chance to talk to them, they definitely reference what our teachers are experiencing, and they want to hear these things and to be able to share this. And if they're watching right now, you know, I welcome them as well. That's why it's so important that we share these things.
I have a question asking if there's any updates on metrics from the Department of Health regarding school closures. It's a matter of science informing statewide decision-making, not personal choice.
So we have been asking now for months for metrics to deal with what about school reopening. And we have not received any. And I think the more important question is, anyone can throw out a number, you know, whether it's 5% of positivity cases or 3%. But I think the question is why that metric, and is that metric been effective that when you open up schools that you're not having to close them again because of cases? And that's something that we're going to continually to push for, is not only are there metrics, but that the data has to be able to show that the research supports those metrics.
And we should give credit, Corey, to the board, because the Board of Ed has been asking for the same thing.
And our legislators have been asking for it too.
Yeah, it's not just us. Lots of people are asking. The Department of Health has not provided anything.
And again, I want to make sure they just don't throw out a number and say this is good enough for school open. Why? And I think that's something that we would be asking for.
So one of our chapter presidents once, on the last question that I had asked, so what happened, no, wait, where to go? Can admin direct synchronous learning? Or can they direct asynchronous learning? If you're doing one, can they direct you to do the other as well?
Just generally, like can the administration say that you need to have like WebEx types of lesson interaction with your student? Yes, I believe they can.
May I give an update regarding EES? There's a question in the thread, and as part of the EES Joint Committee, I'd like to think I have the expertise of our team. So the EES Joint Committee signed off on a memo with clarifications for the manual's implementation for this year. We are eagerly waiting for it to be announced. It was supposed to be out by Tuesday. It is held up on the DOE side, and it's not up yet, and we are waiting. It will hopefully clear things up and alleviate some of our fears and frustrations, and hopefully provide us some sense of relief. You will still be on cycle if you're supposed to be on cycle, but hopefully this will help you to feel that it's accomplishable during this year.
All right, something I think that many of our teachers may be experiencing. Many of us are having students added to our classes and not receiving their IEPs. How soon are we supposed to be provided those documents once a student is added? I'm a general ed teacher, by the way, and I don't have access to any online IEP program if they exist.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing. You know, that's you know, important that we be able to hear. I don't know if Andy, if you have an answer for that.
Generally, teachers are supposed to be provided that fairly quickly. I will note that if people are teleworking, that may require you to go to campus and get access to that information to review it. I do not believe, and I could be wrong, but I don't believe that general ed teachers get access to the same database that the SPED teachers. I see Logan shaking her head. So you are supposed to be given that information. I would refer you to your respective SPED department head and or your administrator that is assigned to help support special ed. They should be getting those to you in a timely manner, because you are, obviously, you know that you have to make sure that those IEP needs are being met.
Again, if you have your stories that you want to share, you can put it into the comment section. Logan and Osa are doing the best to be your voices, and it's so important that we hear your stories. If you have questions, you can put them into the comment section. We're all watching them as they come in. You can also, if you want to be anonymous, go to bit.ly/HSTA school reopening. And remember that the Facebook comments are public.
Yeah, and again, I want to thank Kelly Kanana and Terry Inefuku, who are behind the scenes helping us to collect all of that. And speaking of stories, just want to say one of the things that was shared in the Facebook is that they agree that her third graders are doing great using Google Slides, Docs, Jamboard, etc. They are learning a lot like this, and keep it going until at least January, she says.
Thank you for sharing.
I don't know about Corey's daughter, but my son is learning a lot too. He's enjoying the distance learning and he feels a lot safer.
My daughter and I see this in the comment section too. My daughter wants to be back in school. And as a parent, I want her to be safe. I know there have been cases at my school at Campbell. I know she's learning a lot though. And so I can personally thank all of her teachers out there. They've been working really hard. And I know how hard a lot of you are working too. So thank you.
So speaking of students being in virtual settings, what is HSTA's stance on recording our classes online lessons to post them on our class websites? And does this violate FERPA? So could I, in the morning when I have my synchronous session with my students, record it and then post it? If they were to miss it or need to review, could they come back and watch it if I just post it on my Bitmoji classroom?
Right. Corey, you want me to do that one?
Please.
There's nothing wrong with that. It does not violate FERPA generally. The only time you have to worry about FERPA is if somehow in the course of that recording, you're saying, and Logan, today's your birthday, which is September 10th, 2010. And we know that you're turning however many years that is, 10 years old. Then we start to get in very personally identifiable. Or Logan, we know that you have an IEP, so you get special treatment today in this way. If you're starting to do very personally identifiable things like that, then that's a problem. But you would never do that anyway. So there's generally no problem with that.
Do the videos need to be on some kind of platform that's not just easily found?
My understanding is that you have to make sure that you're following the DOE technology rules and ensuring that they are secure. So I think most teachers are posting them somehow through Google Classroom or the like. And I look to you guys if you have more details on that.
Are you recycling cans in the background? Or
Sorry,
which is a great thing. Oh, that's a great thing.
That's my son, sorry.
All at home, yes.
I didn't realize you could hear that. How embarrassing.
No, so
Hold on.
one of the questions, and this is more for Corey anyway, what is the status of state testing? Did we get a waiver?
So as part of our agreement with the MOU, there was an agreement that the state would request a waiver. What we've heard recently is that the Department of Education under Betsy DeVos is not granting these waivers for this school year. I really hope we have a new Secretary of Education. I think that with all the trauma that our students are going through right now and trying to learn, the difficulty to try to add in the stress of testing is too difficult. So that is something that we will continue to advocate for at the federal level as part of NEA, that they do not require the use of standardized testing. And if waivers are provided, we will definitely continue to ask for that waiver for the state of Hawaii.
But if they allowed a waiver last year, why wouldn't they allow it this year?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, good question.
Well, I was just trying to think, like Betsy DeVos and her gang have ulterior motives, I believe. So, you know, they want kids in school. You've heard our president, got to get the kids in school. It's ridiculous.
Okay, what do we got next? Logan, you're
Logan, you're
muted.
muted.
Of course I am, because that's
Okay.
gonna happen. Sorry, now I lost my place. So more students are requesting learning hubs on campuses. As a result, administrators have asked teachers at a certain school to take kids in their classes during class time. What does HSTA feel?
Go ahead, Andy. Why don't you take that one first, then I'll add on.
Yeah, my answer would be it depends on a lot of different things. One in which, so for example, if that is a child that's on your roster and the principal is asking that they be able to come into your classroom for in-person, technically there's not a contractual violation. As you know, we're in a protracted, I guess dispute would be a nice way of putting it, with the employer, and we have a labor board case regarding the failure to bargain this decision to go all distance learning. And those were among the things that we wanted to talk about. And we have not had any substantive discussions with the DOE since August 12th. And so, you know, I'd need more information, but generally, you know, the department has taken a very loose approach to this. This idea of having kids on campus. It's a misnomer to say they're completely distance learning, and I think we all know that.
And I want to appreciate their, you know, again, your stories are so important. You know, a teacher reached out. You know, there were a lot of kids in the library. They were not wearing masks effectively, and you know, packing that many people into a confined space, not having their masks being worn, that is a problem. And that's why, you know, even for learning labs and hubs, we totally get that kids need internet access, and we support the departments working to try to provide computers and Wi-Fi access. But just because a child needs internet access does not make them impervious to this virus. And putting that many people into a space, what's going to happen to that teacher and to those students?
So with Lieutenant Governor Josh Green last night saying that it's doable to open tourism on October 1st and we should open our schools on October 13th, how do you respond to that?
You know, the Lieutenant Governor has consistently said that there needs to be certain criteria to do the opening of the schools. We have seen in New York, for example, doing mass testing. That is not happening here. You know, we have to remember just a few days ago that we were still, over 200 cases in Hawaii. We know that just in the last few days, in the last week, we've seen a growing number of cases in Hawaii in our schools. One of the things that HSTA has consistently asked for, which the others have asked for as well. There was an auditor's report, legislators asked it. what is happening by school? And we have not gotten that. So before that question can be answered, before we say, let's open up our schools, how can we make that decision if the data does not support that our schools are safe to reopen? So I would hope that the Lieutenant Governor would look at the situation more. And, you know, we have to make careful decisions for everyone in this case. But at this point, we do not believe as a union that we either have that data or it's safe.
Yes, and as we start to wrap up, I just want to also say that our hearts go out to the person that was lost at Dole Middle School. Although she was not a teacher or a member of our unit, she is still part of our Kuleana, and we're all in this together. So condolences to her and her family. So Corey, I think we're about up for our time.
Okay, so thank you. And Osa, I appreciate that too. This is our worst fear. In fact, it was asked before. We know that there are students that have died too, nationally over this. We've had our colleagues on the mainland pass away as well. So our wishes go to all of their families too. And I don't think that any one of us would want to face that situation here in Hawaii. So definitely goes out to the Dole Middle School Ohana as well. So with that, I want to thank all of you for putting in your questions and your comments. For those of you who are not watching this live, you know, you can still always reach out to your uniserves and to reach out to the officers. Even going through this process, I cannot tell you how important it is to hear from all of you about what's going on, and that makes such a difference. I want to thank Kelly Ka'ana'ana for helping out with the questions and the answers. I want to thank our great communication staff, Kyoki Kerr, Terry Inafuku, and Chris Schubert, who are working behind the scenes to make this all get done. I want to thank Osa Tui, our Vice President, Logan Okita, our Secretary Treasurer. Thank you to Andy Eshelman, our Deputy Executive Director and our Chief Negotiator. Wealth of information there always. And as we finish this up, I just want to say all of you that one of the most important things during this entire crisis is we wanted to make sure that you're informed as best as we can. You know, we've been trying to do these Facebook Lives or whether we do press conferences so that you can be there as well to make sure that you are as informed as possible. And I want you to know that as a union, we have to work together and we will continue to advocate. One of the things that's so important, and I saw this recently, is that the people on the screen are not HSTA. It's all of us together. And recently, you know, I was so touched to see how many of you posted, we are HSTA together. During this pandemic, it is so important that we take care of each other. I want to thank all of you. I've been awed by the amazing work that you have done during this difficult circumstance. I appreciate how many of the extra hours that all of you are putting in. I think that people don't understand that we're not sitting at home, that we are working very difficult. We're working very hard to make sure that our kids can be educated. And I want you to know that that's appreciated, and thank you all. So thank you also very much for being today with us, and thank you for being members of HSTA.